What's going on, everybody? Welcome on back to Neverlag for February. Do you think people are insane if they say February?
Yes, absolutely.
What are we doing with that R? Every time I write it, I'm like, what is that doing there?
Yeah, I feel like it's
Oh,
time. It's time to drop it.
it's time to get rid of the
It's been
R.
long
Let's
enough.
start a movement.
Yep.
Anyways, yes, for February, we're into March now. Somehow in 2024 here, and so we're going to take a look back at February like we did January before it, and see. I don't know. Talk about kind of whatever. Pretty loose form discussion here. Things we've been playing, and maybe some other tidbits in there. So I, of course, am Levi, joined by the man who fell in the pit himself, Zach. How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. I can't believe February's over.
I know.
I
Welcome to March.
I had a lot of ambitions for what I would get done in February, and mostly I just played Final Fantasy stuff. So
Spoiler.
that's
Yeah, and it was the
another.
longest February we've had in 4 years, and it still just is
And it
gone.
felt shorter. We had one extra day, and it felt like a shorter February than I've ever had. So
Yeah.
how are
I
how are
was
you
kind of
doing?
thinking about Leap Day. Like, why is Leap Day not a bigger thing? Once
Yeah, like
every 4 years, there's just this magical extra day. Why aren't we like out in the streets parading and frolicking
that's a
through
good point.
meadows and I don't know, gallivanting on adventure? It feels like it should be something a little bit more celebrated, and it's just another day for companies
Yeah,
to make more money.
an extra day every 4 years is such a weird little thing.
It's very
You'd think there
whimsical.
would be something that happens, yeah, or like some type of lore, or
We watched the 30 there's a 30 Rock episode
I was gonna
about
say
Leap Day.
I thought
Do you
something
remember
had
that?
that. Yeah,
Yeah,
vaguely.
and it basically is satire on all holidays, but like creates an entire holiday for Leap Day with colors and like a mascot and some creepy lore behind it. And you have
They're
to
like,
like
don't you
you have to,
remember?
if you're a child, you have to cry to get candy, and like it's just
Right.
it's pretty funny. I was like, you know
Uh,
what? Next, from now on, Leap Days for me. It's crazy to think that however old I am, I've had what, 7 Leap Days in my entire
yeah,
life.
yeah,
Like, you got to make those count. So I don't know. I'm gonna plan some shenanigans for next Leap Day.
yeah. See, that's important because all I do is I have like a small existential crisis every time a leap day comes around because I remember
That
that
too.
I have done nothing.
Another 4 years.
Another 4 years gone.
Oh God.
Oh,
All right.
so we'll
Some
see you in
deep
4 years. Yeah,
existential crisis here to start our episode. So,
that's right.
um, yeah, we had our Leap Day February, and some surprise hits for the month. So let's go ahead and jump into whatever it is. I mean, let's see. I guess let's start with Helldivers, because everyone played Helldivers in February
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
much.
Hmm.
Um, I was looking at my calendar, and I started off the month kind of losing steam on Pal World. Um,
Yep, same.
Played that to death in January, and actually still have an itch to go back and play it. I was waiting for some patches to fix some AI and stuff with the pals that were just driving me nuts at a certain point. But we went from that, like, one out of nowhere phenomenon, to another in February with Helldivers 2, which no one saw being what what it turned out to
What it
be.
became.
And I've got some review opinions on it, which I guess we'll get into. But overall, I mean, you played some Helldivers 2. I know we played a couple
Yeah.
times in co-op, and yeah, I'm just curious your thoughts on your maybe briefer experience with it.
Yeah, I played it I think twice with you and once on my own. So not a ton, but solid probably 6+ hours in that game. And I had a lot of fun with it. I think I'm not sure if that game is like is as good as the hype it's getting, or if it just happens to be the thing that's missing in the market, or maybe a little bit of both. But I do think it's a really fun game. It's uh, it's fun to have like a co-op experience where you're working together. Like, I'm not a big fan of like online competitive type games. I'm not very good at them. But a good co-op game that like we can play, or like you can play with friends and try and accomplish various goals. It's something I haven't done a ton of in a while. Like, we used to play Destiny, and haven't played that in a couple of years. And so it was fun to have like a sci-fi shooting game where you're running around blasting aliens with friends, trying to achieve a mission and unlock, you know, rewards and things like that. Um, I think there's a certain element of like satire with Helldivers. It's also really fun, and so kind of the Starship Troopers feel, where it's like you're fighting for democracy, but you're really just like exterminating this alien race that I think the implication is that humanity is actually kind of cultivating for resources is pretty amusing.
Right.
And so I
Democracy is a ploy
right, and so
or
I
a
think
facade.
yeah, having that little bit of like a satire element, I think adds kind of something fun and whimsical to it. That was some a nice bit of flavor. But in terms of gameplay, I thought the shooting was pretty fun. It's a very like intense experience. Like they did a good job of making it feel like things can go from 0 to 100 really quick if you're not paying attention. Um, I think one of the standouts for me was I'm forgetting what they're called, where you like you do orders and then it like summons like airship strikes or
Stratagems.
stratagems. Yeah, that was a really cool added layer where you're running around and it is a first person shooter, but in order to successfully achieve a lot of your missions, you have to be thinking about when do I call in for help from like our orbiting ships to like use the heavy firepower, because just your weaponry that you have on the ground is not going to be enough for especially a lot of the bigger stuff you fight. But it was fun. It was a silly time. um I think the price point was right, is the last thing I'll say. Is like I think it's easy to enjoy that game with was it $40? um
Yeah.
because I think it does what it's doing really well. I think had it been $70, it would have felt like maybe it's missing something for the price for that price point.
Mm-hmm.
But I think at $40, it's they know what they are, and they did a really good job with the feature set that they offered. So I had a lot of fun with it, and we played a bit together. So I'm curious to hear what you think. You ended up playing more Helldivers than me this month, and so yeah, what do you
Yeah,
think?
actually, I don't know how much. I don't know what my hour count is. PlayStation's never terribly accurate with those things, um, but I've got to be over 40 hours um, over the course of the month. So I actually went on a bit of a roller coaster with this game. At launch, I I guess I was kind of baffled by the overwhelming praise this game was receiving. Um, I mean, it was a perfect video game, and everyone was playing it, and there was I was very surprised by that, and it didn't click with me at first. I do think that I think this is a good video game that knows what it wants to do, does it well, and is priced correctly. And I think that it kind of inadvertently launched at the exact right time to kind of be the poster child for protesting against what most companies are doing right now. And people are just kind of fed up with these half-baked live service games that launch at $70 and have $40 skins in the store.
Yeah.
People are just super done with it. And you've got Suicide Squad that came out as well in February.
Was that in
Kind of,
February too?
yeah, kind of
Wow.
acting as the um, antithesis of
Mm-hmm.
what Helldivers proved to be. And so I think that bandwagon was all the stronger for kind of these like inner political feelings people are having within video games at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think that propelled it to the stratosphere. I think it's a great game. And at first I was just like, why is everybody so positive on this? Because it is a weird game. And when you go into it not really knowing what it is, and it
Yeah.
does a pretty bad job of tutorializing just about everything. I mean, from using your abilities to like progression.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's true.
very like the opening mission is like, here's how you shoot, and then it's like, go play the game, and you're like, all right,
Yeah,
I
that's the
knew how to
one thing
do
I
that.
don't need to be
Yeah,
explained how to do is
exactly.
shoot.
So I will say, like, you start out, and I mean, for those who haven't played, it's I guess this game would be best best compared to like a Deep Rock Galactic, which I never would have guessed before launch. But there is no campaign. You start the game, you do an opening mission that's about 10 minutes long, and then you are let loose into the game, which is just multiplayer lobbies. You can play single player, group up with friends, or random matchmaking, and you go into missions of varying difficulties. And as you get into higher difficulties, there are sets of missions, two or three, that comprise an entire operation. and your goal is to successfully complete these missions within a certain time limit with a certain amount of respawns, um, and not get overwhelmed by the overwhelming amount of enemies that will spawn, whether they are robots or bugs. So, and that's it. You complete your mission, you get rewards, you go back to your ship, you upgrade some stuff, get some new stratagems, and then you go out on another mission. So, the progression at first, I think, is really what kind of had me sour on it, because you complete a certain difficulty mission, and then you unlock the next one. You go, okay, let me go on to the next one, and okay, we complete that one, go on to the next one. You reach a point where you've you've outpaced your progression in difficulty, and the game doesn't really tell you that in any way other than just beating your face in. And so you have to look at it and go, okay, let me drop back or whatever, because it starts to really slow down unlocking these stratagems, which are the game changing pieces for your missions. Um, and it was just really frustrating to reach a difficulty where it's just like, I don't have the tools. And also at that point in the game, when you're that new to the game, it's hard to foresee that the tools you haven't unlocked will make that big of a difference. It
Yeah.
just feels like an insurmountable amount of enemies, and you're just like, what is this infuriating game that is spawning 4 giant shielded charger bugs on me amidst a sea of little ones? And it's just like, you can't run very fast. The game is very different than what you'd think, and I think that can um, be to its detriment at first. Once you figure out this is not so much an action first person shooter, it really is not. It is a tactical, um, it almost borders on real time strategy game. Like, you really have to be careful with where you are placed. When you use your stratagems, you better not miss, because they have, potentially several minute long cooldowns, and you will get overrun. So, anyways, that was kind of my arc with this game. I started out kind of being like, man, I don't get it. I think this just isn't for me. And then at some point, I don't remember when it clicked. And yeah, I think it is the perfect game for um, over the course of the year, maybe even over the course of 2024, dropping in, whether it's you and I or my brother or some other friends, picking a night this week. Hey, let's drop in and play some Helldivers, do
Yeah.
some missions. I think it's so perfect for that, because um, it's not complicated. Um, I think about, like, oh, if we wanted to drop in and play Destiny, put the monetization aside, I wouldn't know where to start. And
Yeah.
that's so often the problem with a lot of these games, because you and I, we want to go off and we want to play other game, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth or whatever it may be, and then come back to this and not have to relearn a new language.
Yeah.
And I think this game is so simple. Its core concept is so simple that it's perfect for that, and yet it has that addictive, like, one more run. Like, I
Yeah.
just want to drop in and shoot some bugs. So
Yeah.
um, really, I've really enjoyed it. It's had a just a host of technical problems for its launch that um at first it was like, well, that's how it goes, and then 2 weeks
It
go
just
by and
keeps
3 weeks,
going.
and you're
Yeah.
like, all right, come on, we need to. I still will drop in and, like, have matchmaking problems where I can't connect to other people, or my brother and I can't connect, or like weird things are happening and it's just making
Yeah.
it difficult. um so I know that they've had, you know so many more people playing this game than they expected.
Yeah.
But that, it is frustrating. So hopefully they can get all that ironed out. I did see today they released a patch, which really was disheartening for me, because they have nerfed um, pretty much all of the things that were being used the most. And for a PvE game that is this hard and has this much chaos, you gotta buff everything else. Don't nerf. Don't be that company. And companies never learn. They always come in and nerf what everyone's using.
What's the point of nerfing
Instead,
when it's just PVE though? Like that's the
oh, it
thing I
drives
don't.
me nuts, man.
That's the thing I don't
So if they're
understand.
if
It's
they're
not
gonna
like
be
this
doing
game is
that,
easy. Yeah.
yeah, I know. No, it's not at all. Like, the funny thing is, for variety, I might be like, oh, let me try out some other weapons. I don't think they're strong enough, like, to do certain missions.
Yeah.
So for them to come in and nerf some of this stuff, the rail gun and the breaker shotgun, um, very disheartening to me, because I'm like, if they go down that road where it's just like, I just can't stand that anymore with live service games, especially ones that aren't competitive,
Yeah.
like PvP and things like that. Like, stop messing with everyone's fun. You've got people, I even saw comments on some of these videos talking about the patch, people who haven't even reached the level yet to unlock the railgun. And now the railgun's nerfed, and it's just like, you're trying to work towards a build, and granted, it's not the same as like a full-on RPG in this game, but it just doesn't sit right with me. So I don't know. Hopefully they didn't go too far. They added some stuff like weather elements, fire tornadoes, and create more stuff to kill you. So that's great.
Yeah, I see. I'm fine with that, but yeah, don't nerf the fun stuff. Like, it's not PvP. There's no real balance. Like, and it's not like this game was too easy and they were complaining. Like my experience playing it, and then like every clip I've seen on YouTube and TikTok is people screaming and being overwhelmed by bugs. Like,
Exactly.
leave the railgun in place.
Yeah, I was really shocked to see that, honestly,
Yeah.
but we'll see. I'll get back
We'll
in
see.
there, if not today, sometime this week, and see what some of the changes they made, how they affect everything. So hopefully we can all get together and play it. But yeah, I think it for where I'm at in my life and in gaming, I think it actually perfectly fits the mold for the co-op drop in and hang out with the guys for a bit
Yeah.
game.
Well, I think
It's simple and it's fun.
I think that's a big reason why this is so successful. Is there was an opening in the market for that. Like, there isn't a good game that is doing those things super well recently, and I think a lot of gamers these days are like us. There's a lot of adult gamers who have busy lives, but games are a way you keep in touch with your friends, and so having something that isn't complicated, doesn't require figuring out all of the pieces of content you maybe have unlocked, or all of the things you need to do, like Destiny, for example. Like, I played that for years and I still couldn't tell you how to get back into that, or like, how do you access the right content, or and I think Helldivers kind of respects your time a little bit, in the sense of this, like, just drop in, start playing, and have fun, versus here's all the things you need to do for 10 hours before you can really play, or whatever else. So
It's nice.
I
It's got that modern. I mean, it's online. It's modern in
mhm.
that way, but it really harkens back to like early 2000s. Almost like having a LAN party,
Yeah, it
and
really does feel that way.
it feels it's channeling that pretty well.
Well, and I think that says something about what gamers, consumers actually want. Like, a lot of these live service games, it's like they're trying to create these systems that companies want us to want, that we don't. Like, we want good games, we want to be able to play online with our
Yeah,
friends, but they take that to this point of like constant online activity, and we want people online all the time, all day, every day. We want to have all these different monetization structures so that we can increase like the value per user that we were able to extract from you. And certainly there's an element of that with Helldivers, like there's with anything, but it feels much more like, here's the game, go have fun with it, and that's kind of the focus, and it's pretty simple. So
yeah.
I'm excited to play more of it.
I I think we're probably not going to touch on any news today, but like it does make me think, what is the lesson that companies or even Sony personally will take from this game? Because I feel like the success of this game is going to feel like the success of a single player game almost, and a $40 one at that. Because I think another thing people are so, I don't know, just really clicking with is the price point feels
Yeah.
honest, and the shop feels like not detrimental to the game whatsoever. I haven't put any money into it, and I feel like I've been able to get anything I want. If I did want something, things are $2 and $3.
Yeah.
Like, I could buy a pack and get a couple pieces of armor. Whereas I've never played these games, but apparently most games now, Suicide Squad, Fortnite, their skins are like $30, $40,
Yeah.
which is just
That's how Diablo was.
mind-boggling to me
I think
that
Diablo
people
had
pay that.
yeah. Diablo
But
had
I
like
think
a
people are done with it. I
$50.
think people are really tired of it.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, I'm really curious what companies, what Sony, what the lesson is going to be, because I know that Sony's going through a decent amount of changing the direction of the ship, some turmoil perhaps. Everyone's laying off 5 to 10% of their workforce because gaming, despite continuing to make more profits, is not making all of the money that it was during the pandemic. Um, and I think live services have really burnt out. But here we have an example of one that is successful, and yet when you look at the dollar signs, which we won't maybe get to see, I doubt it's going to look as successful to people just looking at numbers.
Yeah, it's probably not in the
Um,
billions, but a lot of live service games had this feeling that they could hit what Fortnite is doing. And I
yeah.
think these companies see Fortnite, they're like, we'll just make a Fortnite, as if we could just
So
have all of these
yeah,
billion
right. Everyone
dollar
wants to
live
just
services everyone's
scratch off
always
the
wanted.
lottery ticket, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I wonder, will Sony look at this and go, okay, this is what a live service game should look like? Or probably not, because companies don't really do that.
No,
They go,
they'll
let's
look at
make
it
the
and
next Fortnite.
they'll say people
Oh, we
love
should have
this
turned
game.
Helldivers into Fortnite.
The reason people love this game is because of bugs and bad tutorializing. So let's take that and make a true live service game.
Yeah. I don't
It's
know.
like
We'll
when
see.
movie studios take the wrong thing, like this monster movie was good, so we're going to make a monster extended universe. It's like, it's just a good movie. Just make more good movies.
Just make good stuff. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Maybe we can touch on Sony a bit, but Helldivers is awesome. Played a lot of it. We'll continue to play it throughout the year, I think. I think it'll kind of slot in as my ongoing game, to be honest, at this point. I think it's, which is surprising. I wouldn't have guessed that at the beginning of the month. So,
Yeah.
um, okay, I've got some puzzle games and you've got some Final Fantasy.
I have
So
four different games that we can kind of go through that all have a
why don't you
shared
take
theme.
me on this Final Fantasy VII journey and explain to me why a reasonable human would do this?
Okay. Um, so in preparation for Rebirth, I wanted to replay the remake, obviously. But then as I started doing that, I kind of wanted to replay the original Final Fantasy VII. I had ambitions to do that back when Remake was about to come out, but I didn't get around to finishing it. And, the last time I actually beat Final Fantasy VII, I was a teenager. I was probably like 14 or something. So I got it on Switch and started playing it. And I didn't think I was actually going to go through with it, but I ended up playing through all of the original Final Fantasy VII, all 3 discs, which I don't know how long it took me.
You finished it?
I did finish it. I
Oh,
finished it.
wow.
I technically finished it in March, but like a couple days ago. But it, I went through the whole thing. Now, something that helped me with it is the original like port of Final Fantasy VII has a feature where you can speed up the game. Like you can
Like
do
a fast
time
forward.
like a ×3, which is good because a lot of those old RPGs are kind of slow moving, and so it's like there's a lot of animations and transitions where it's like kind of mind numbing
Everything repeats.
nowadays. Yeah, and it's or like animation times between moves during combat that I don't know that I would have had the attention to sit through so consistently. And the way Final
Did
Fantasy
you play this
VII,
on Steam Deck?
I played this on Switch because I had it on
Oh,
Switch.
really?
Yeah.
And on Switch, so like baked into the game, they have a fast forward
Yeah.
feature.
They
Oh,
have a
really?
fast forward. They also have a feature where you can like buff your characters so you constantly get their limit breaks and like their health regenerates and stuff. But I didn't really use that just because I was trying to play through the game. But the fast forward was really nice because I was able to do a game that probably would have taken me like 30 plus hours, and I was probably able to do that in like 18 to 20 hours. Just because everything was
Really? That's
sped
what I
up.
was curious. So you think your playtime was around or under 20 hours for?
I'd have to go look. I would say it was probably around 20 hours, maybe a little more.
That's
Um,
crazy. I would never have guessed that it was
Now, to be fair, I didn't
that
do
short.
everything. I didn't do all the side.
Yeah.
There's a lot of side quests. I think I missed it, at least one character you can unlock. There's a lot of different characters, so I didn't do everything. I just wanted to like get through the main meat of the story. It's an interesting game though. Like I think Final Fantasy VII it came out in 1997. Um, the graphics obviously look very blocky, but the exploration in this game is so weird. At times it's kind of like top down, slightly 3D, but at times it feels like they just have like a painting and your little character is kind of like this two-dimensional blob on the painting and you're trying to figure out where you need to go, and it's almost like it doesn't really indicate like how to navigate things, and you just kind of have to figure out
I mean,
where do I.
is it kind of like a Donkey Kong overworld map? Donkey Kong
There is an
Country.
overworld. There is also an overworld.
That's what
Yeah.
it sounds like. You're kind of like moving your character on a map, but it's 2D. Is that what you're
Yeah,
describing?
well, the overworld is 3D, and then you'll go into specific like from the overworld, you'll go into specific regions, or like Midgar, for example, and that'll have its own zones, and that's more kind of sort of top down's not quite the right word, but yeah, it almost feels like you have this like painting or tableau your characters are on, and it'll be like the path. It looks like a
Oh,
painting
but
that
it
goes
is
into the
top down,
distance. Yeah, it's kind of more top.
isometric top down. Okay.
Yeah, um, so it's
Are those
very
sections
interesting.
just for getting from one area to another, or are those like you're exploring, you're running into combat
That's
situations?
your exploring. You're running into, well, kind of both. In
Really?
the overworld, you explore and run into combat situations. So it's like the overworld is the main, like where you get from place to place, and then the smaller zones, like you go into a particular village or city that might have some smaller zones that are more top down, and you can run into combat there. Um, but it's weird because it's like trying to figure out where to go. It's like a painting, and it's not always clear, and you have to like use the joystick, and it's not very intuitive sometimes, and so in a way it's
Huh.
kind of terrible, but in a way it's charming. And it's, I think what's really cool about Final Fantasy VII Original is you very much get the vision of this world these people had, with severe limitations of what games were able to do at the time. And so it's impressive to get like such world building and such a well crafted story expressed through
Within those
such a,
limitations,
yeah, and it really comes through. And the other thing that's really interesting is,
more skill was needed.
yeah, and I think more a certain type of creativity. Like I think those constraints added something in creatively, because they
Yeah,
had to
because
work
you
within
can't
these weird,
rely on visuals or yeah.
yeah. And so it's interesting. Exploration's interesting. Combat's pretty good. It's, classic turn-based combat, but the limit breaks make it pretty fun. I actually was fairly engaged with combat. And then the story, I have to say, like, the story is just great. The characters are great. um at first I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get through all of this, but by the end I was pretty enchanted by it. Like, I was sad to finish it. Like, I don't have that game that I'm playing anymore. And it was
Hmm.
also cool to kind of see, because I've played Remake now, and then I replayed Remake kind of concurrently. It's cool to see how much Remake and even Rebirth are taking from that game. Like, obviously they're evolving it in a lot of ways, but it's surprising
Taking the
just,
core pillars along.
yeah, even a lot of details. And it's like they'll reimagine them based on what we can do now, and then obviously they're expanding on a lot of things. Like in Remake, you don't get Jessie's story with her family on the upper plate. So there's some things they expand on, but a lot of the details, and even certain like side quest elements and these random characters, are like throwbacks to things that were actually in the game.
Yeah.
And it's cool to see like how much like reverence the team has. And so even though I have some issues with Remake, and like we've talked about pacing issues, I mean, there's some quirks with it, but just the amount of reverence they have, I think that's why they were able to so well realize this game in a new format. um so yeah, I'm kind of rambling here, and I want to leave
So
time
before
for
you
you.
move on from this, then I guess as someone, Final Fantasy VII, ever since the remake came out, has been this like, should I? Oh, I probably should. I probably never will. Um, After Rebirth, man, maybe maybe this is a question for 10 years from now when we finish
Yeah.
the freaking third game. But like, I don't know, with the fast forward feature, and I believe the Switch version, the newer PC version, it's been remastered, right? A little bit at least.
I maybe a little.
I
I
don't
would have
think
to,
it's original.
yeah, I would have to compare it. I don't remember
Well, with
what it looks
okay,
like on a
so
PlayStation.
I've it'll be a unique perspective because I obviously am playing the remake
Yeah.
without ever having played the original. Um, do you think that, I mean, with the fast forward feature is like a sell to me. Like, I don't
Yeah.
want to spend 50 hours in this game from 1996 or whatever, you know? So the fact that maybe I could do it in 20 hours um, is a little bit more like, hey, maybe I could do this. Do you think it's
Yeah.
worth it for me after Rebirth, or conceivably somewhere down the line after I finish all of the remake, to go back and see the original story as someone who doesn't have the nostalgia and doesn't really, I mean, I can sometimes click with a turn-based combat system, but I can also get bored with it. Um, but I like a
Yeah.
good story. I mean, do you think it's something I should actually make time for, or something that I should make time for, but never will.
That is a hard question to answer. Knowing you, I feel like you would get a little frustrated with the turn-based combat because for its time and for it being turn-based, it's the limit breaks definitely add a little bit of dynamic or like dynamism to it. That also harkens to like the new games where you can do like the cross slash that Cloud does, or some of their different abilities.
Yeah.
And that makes the combat more fun, and it makes it a little bit more real time. Like, because if you're just sitting around like trying to figure out what to do, like enemies will just keep attacking you. So, it's fairly engaging for what it is. But it's not. It doesn't like have a ton of layers beyond that. It doesn't continue to evolve. Like a lot of modern day games, I think have learned like you kind of have this progression where of combat and this kind of scale and. I don't know.
So what here put a percentage on it for me. Percentages of enjoyment pertaining to combat, story, and nostalgia.
Nostalgia is 100%. That's cranked all the way. So I don't know how that would work for you. I would say.
Well, instead of that, break it down. You have 100% to work with for all three.
Oh,
what
I
percent
see.
goes to which?
Yeah. I would say story's 50%. Combat is maybe 15 to 20%. And nostalgia is probably 25-30%, something like that. Nostalgia is definitely a factor
so combat's
here.
Definitely the lowest.
Yeah, combat's the lowest, but it's still pretty good. I mean, the story.
I guess I should have said gameplay. Would that change it at all, or is gameplay just
little.
pretty much combat?
Yeah, I mean, it's combat, it's exploration, and like I said, exploration's weird because sometimes it's really interesting and sometimes it's really frustrating.
Okay.
There are some. There are a lot of mini games in it, surprisingly, and some of the
That was another like side question I had, because I heard that Rebirth is chock full of mini games.
There's a decent amount.
That's true to the original, which I
it is.
didn't know.
Yeah. Well, and if you played Intermission, right?
Yeah, and we'll get to that here in just a minute.
I think you probably played Fort Condor, the like board.
The
board
one
game.
time I had to, yes.
I like Fort Condor. Fort Condor, like that's from the original game.
Really?
It's like a reimagined version of that.
I didn't give it an honest chance, but the impression, I was just like, I don't want to do any more of this.
I liked Fort Condor. But a lot of the mini games, some of them are fun, some of them are just very old and clunky. And so I think my honest opinion of this is I do think it's worth playing. I think it's really cool to see such an impressive like moment in gaming history and to like see how well certain aspects of it are done. But it's also a little frustrating at times. The fast forward absolutely makes it viable. I think the thing is, if you get it cheap on like Switch, or if you can get it with the fast forward feature on Steam Deck, which you probably can.
I'm sure.
I think it's worth giving it a try and just kind of play it here and there. Like this was something I was playing kind of in the background, just on my Switch.
On Steam Deck, I could probably even find some mods to make it a little bit better or whatever.
You probably
Although
could.
I don't know if that would ruin the experience. I don't know. So we reached no conclusion here. Tune in 2030.
I think
to
you
find
should
out
give
if
it.
I played.
I think you should give it a try. But I think knowing how you like, I think people who are much more into retro gaming absolutely should. Like this is one of the best video games ever made historically for a reason. And I felt that by the time it was over, I was like, yeah, like this is a masterpiece for its time. That being said, a lot of those limitations in 2024 are frustrating, and you're dealing with them for 20 plus hours. And I know how, like, knowing the things you value, I think you would also struggle somewhat to get through it, even though I think at the end you would appreciate the overall experience. So,
all right.
Final Fantasy VII.
You've convinced me by telling me I shouldn't do it. Now I'm going to play it to spite you. No,
exactly. Don't do it.
You know what we'll do is, if this channel blows up and we just have millions of viewers and people want to see me play Final Fantasy VII for the first time, that's what we'll do.
That's right. Like and subscribe to watch Levi do a Let's Play. That would actually, I would watch that. That would be really interesting.
So okay. So now from here, let's go right into Remake just a little bit. Maybe, I guess we've all played Remake in
I can keep this one a little more.
So what do you think? Did you take away anything new from replaying it?
A little bit.
I guess that's the start.
I would say overall, I appreciate Final Fantasy VII Remake more the second time I played it. Um, but at the same time, the
Were you playing
issues
it at a quicker clip, maybe skipping stuff, or were you doing
I
side
skipped a
stuff?
few things. I did some side stuff. I skipped some side quests that were particularly slow and irritating. I skipped. Um, Final Fantasy VII Remake, like I don't know if it was just like, back when COVID was happening, we were all kind of just wrapped up in how weird things were. But and maybe it was playing this alongside the original, but seeing how true to the original vision and spirit of Final Fantasy VII the remake was, and also seeing like these iconic scenes and sequences from my childhood realized so high fidelity and so well. Like overall, it was really well done.
Yeah.
Like especially the beginning with the bombing mission, like you bombing the Mako reactor and like fighting, trying to escape from that, and a lot of different sequences. Cloud meeting Aerith, like falling through the church and finding Aerith, and then there's just so many awesome sequences that are very much taken from scenes in the original game. But in the original game, it's like
Ones you had
they
to almost imagine a little bit like reading a book
yes,
in the original game, and now you're getting to see it like it's a movie.
that is the perfect way to describe it. And a lot of times when this happens, that kind of you lose something because it's hard to compare to your own
Well,
imagination.
I was gonna say to that effect, I don't have the context of the original Final Fantasy VII, so I don't know, but I get the sense playing the remake that that this is as good as it gets, and it
Yeah.
really goes one of two ways when you try to do this. When you try to remake something old new, or retell a story from, or go from a book to a movie, it goes one of
Hmm.
two directions. It either ruins it quite
Yeah.
literally, and
Yeah.
you wish you had never consumed that content and you wish you could expunge it from your memory, or if it's done perfectly, and the odds are like 5%, 95% it's going to ruin it, 5%, it could enhance it, or bring it to life in a way that you've never been able to experience before. And it does seem like they're actually, like, the quality is such that they're doing that with the remake, which is impressive and sounds like what you're saying.
It is, yeah, and I think the real thing for me is like it's better than I think I could have imagined, and I can imagine pretty well. So it was like they pulled it off,
Not to
and
brag.
yeah, and not to brag, but I can imagine a lot.
My
Um,
imagination, pretty nuts. So
so it just gave me this childlike joy to like experience these scenes and sequences and characters. And I think some of the depth they added, like seeing where they rounded things out, like with Jesse and Wedge and Biggs, I really enjoyed. Obviously, they added stuff that was just padding, and I'm not a fan of the padding that was just there for padding's sake. But um, overall, very impressed. I feel like they knocked it out of the park with story, characters, just some of the iconic set pieces. Um, and yeah, and so the frustrating things are still there. Like it's not a perfect game, but it's like so good at the things it's trying to do that it's fine. Like
yeah,
I
for
wish they would
me,
cut some of the bloat, but
I don't know if I would ever replay remake. I mean, maybe when they're all out and it's been that much time, maybe I'll be like, all right, let me replay them in the build up to the finale. In
yeah.
another 4 or 5 years or whatever. I could see that. But for me, it was. I often have this hard time with games where it's like, if the story is excellent, but it wastes your time and the
Yeah.
gameplay is all right, I'll be like, you know what? That's too much time commitment. 30 hours for a good story is just too much time. Final Fantasy VII Remake had that problem, but the
Hmm.
combat was good enough,
Yeah.
and the visual presentation was good. Everything else was good enough that it was worth
Yeah.
waiting through the 30 hours or whatever it took.
Yeah.
um,
That
which is
that the
impressive, because for me that takes a lot. If you're
Yeah.
wasting time or you're making me feel a certain way, I'll usually be like, you know what, I'm out. But it was so good on so many fronts that
Yeah.
I was willing to go through any of those things that felt that way.
The combat loop for sure. That's the other thing I
The
noticed
combat
too
is
is
so good. I want more games to try this combat because it's so interesting.
it is. It's crazy too, like playing it alongside the original. The combat fits the spirit of the original so well. Like it feels
Yeah, it's
complementary to the original game, while obviously being way more dynamic and like fast paced, but still you pause and have these moments of strategy, and it harkens back to a lot of the elements from the original, and it's so satisfying. And I've seen people complain about the combat, and I think that like I think that's
Man,
crazy because
when they came
it's
out with the combat for the remake, I was blown. I thought it was revolutionary. I was like,
yeah,
how did
I
you
think it is
manage to
too.
take an old concept and still keep the spirit of it, but make it modern?
Yeah.
You couldn't have done it any better. And I thought it was going to revolutionize turn-based combat and real-time combat into a new genre. And maybe we just haven't seen it yet, but here we are 4 or 5 years later, and not another game has done it.
I know.
So
I
I'm just
really hope
wondering
we
if
see.
opinion on it is more mixed than I'm thinking, but I really thought it was a breath of the wild moment when it comes to a combat system,
Yeah,
and we haven't seen anyone replicate it. So
it's weird. We haven't even seen Square Enix use it in
yeah,
their
they
other
won't even do
Final
it in
Fantasy
16 or
games.
yeah,
Um,
crazy.
which I'm fine with them having different combat systems and different like they're different properties, sort of.
Yeah,
But I do want to see more of it. Like I think it's my favorite Final Fantasy combat system. So it's great, and the music is like it's taking from the
the
original
music is
score, but the
phenomenal.
music
Yeah,
is it's the type of music that we almost never get anymore, and I think that's another piece, and all of that comes together. And I think with the time wasting thing, the thing that makes it not really that big of a deal for me is all of the other elements are so immersive that it's like I'm just enjoying being in this world as Cloud with Tifa and Aerith and Barrett and the others, and with this beautiful score and exploring this beautifully realized Midgar. And so even when it's like kind of slow or it's like wasting my time a little, I'm just enjoying that overall experience and immersion so much that it's okay. Now I wish they would cut some of the bloat, and I'm curious to see how that feels throughout Rebirth, but it's the
I know
overall
I've heard
presentation
Rebirth is
is
considerably longer
yeah.
from what I've been hearing. So
But yeah,
um,
so remake and original, both great games. I
you
thought I
heard it
was going to
here
struggle to get through. Yeah, I thought I
first.
was. Yeah, I know. Hot take. I thought I was going to struggle to get through remake as a replay because of all the bloat, and I just had a blast.
I
I
know.
didn't
I
have an
find it.
issues at all.
Me and Calvin were both chuckling at the time constraints that you have and how hard it is for you to get through games. And here you are finishing both the remake and the original, which I'm finding out is not as time consuming as I thought. But
Yeah, you can move it along. To be fair, I
yeah,
didn't, I didn't play a ton of anything else, and I didn't like. I also like to read, but I read very little. Like almost
okay,
all of my
took
free time
over.
in February was. I kind of went on like a Final Fantasy VII bender. So
Kind of,
like
exactly that.
yeah, yeah,
So to finish the bender, I can chime in here with Intermission because in preparation for Rebirth, actually the day Rebirth launched, which I believe was Leap Day. Did
it
it launch
was.
on Leap Day? It did.
It did launch on Leap Day.
Um, at that moment, I was like, you know what, self? I should have played Intermission, of course. Why didn't I play
Yeah.
Intermission? And so
We
I
both played it
literally
at the
had
same time.
I literally had my copy of Rebirth, and I was like, let me start Intermission here for some reason. I actually looked it up. I was like, is it worth it? Let me check Reddit and see. And everyone was saying, oh yeah, Intermission's a blast. Like, check it out. Like, if you have it, play it before introduced to Yuffie, yada yada. I was like, all right, let's do it. Let me get back. It'll give me um, a refresher of the combat and certain
Hmm.
things. And I guess my cliff notes are: it's short, like 4 to 5 hours. I think if you're just kind of probably four
Yeah,
hours if you're
it
just
took
burning through it, not
it
not
took me
playing Fort
about
Condor.
yeah, it took me I think 5.5 to 6 hours
Five
when
and
I
a
played
half.
some Fort Condor.
I overall, it was a very forgettable experience for me. I didn't need to have played it. It was my conclusion at the end of it, and that's just me personally. I mean, I don't know. To me, it didn't really hit the way the remake did at all. And I understand it's a DLC. Yuffie's character is dialed so strong when she's the focus of the content.
Yeah,
It
the
was a lot. It was a lot. And after the break, like I didn't go from remake into the DLC. I just played the DLC. I know
yeah,
there's some weird parts of the remake, and I know there's weird parts of Final Fantasy VII at large, but man, it was just eccentric to the max. And yeah, it was just weird. It was definitely setting off my weird meter a little too strong. Hopefully I can become a little more endeared to her character in Rebirth, or maybe it gets toned back just a touch when she's not like the main character. Um, other than that, the boss fights are always great. I think they're such a spectacle. Um, so that was a lot of fun. But overall,
yeah.
I came out of it and I was like, yeah, you know what, I could take or leave that DLC. So there's my
Yeah,
2 cents.
I also played it. I think if you're a big fan of the of Final Fantasy VII, it's definitely worth playing. If you like Final Fantasy VII, but you're not a diehard, I don't think it's necessary. I think, yeah, I agree with Yuffie is a very eccentric character. She can be a little annoying. I kind of like her, but I think her is the focus. She is kind of overwhelmed. She's like seasoning. Like she works better in the larger group where you have, Cloud and the others dynamic, and she's kind of playing off that. Um, I did like the combat as Yuffie. I thought it was very interesting and different, using the different elemental abilities with like her throwing star. Um, I thought it was, yeah, I thought the combat with her was pretty fun. And the boss, there were some really cool boss fights, and it's relatively short. So like, if you're getting into the game, it comes with like the package deal. So I think I think it's worth doing if you have it. But uh, yeah, so there's that.
Yeah,
I
that's about all my thoughts on Intermission. So
I also played Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core Reunion. I haven't quite finished it yet, but I'm like
did you
70% of the way through
seriously?
it. Yeah. It's that
Is
one's
that a
pretty
remake?
yeah, it's like
Oh,
a
that's the recent. It came out like
it's
a
a
year or two ago.
yeah, it's a remake of a PSP game.
Is that the one that's focusing on Zach?
Yes it is. Yeah. And so I wanted to play it to understand more of his story, because that's one thing I never experienced is stuff going on with him. And so that game is, I think you can get through that game in about like 10 hours, 8 to 10 hours, maybe a little faster. So I'm kind of working with my way through that.
A
But
couple quick questions on that one.
yeah,
Does it play similarly to Remake?
not really.
And no, okay. And I guess I don't know what my other question is. Is it fun? You having fun?
It's surprisingly, it started out and I was like, man, I don't know if this is worth my time at all. And I'm a pretty diehard Final Fantasy VII fan. So at first I thought, I was like, this is kind of bad. Um, and I still don't think it's a great game by a lot of metrics, but the combat the combat at first feels incredibly basic, but the combat actually gets kind of interesting the further you go along. And
Is it hack and
um,
slash?
it's more hack and slash, but you have different like elemental spells and abilities. Like it has like the abilities from the franchise. So it's like you have like Firaga, like Blizzard, and it combines that with the hack and slash. So you'll get abilities like Blizzard Blade, and so you can like do this spin attack that has like ice imbued with it, and it has kind of the elemental thing where it's like you're trying to understand what are the weaknesses of the enemy I'm fighting, and then how do I use the particular type of weakness in some of my combat. um, and so like there's enough going on with the elemental stuff and different types of abilities and spells, and like you have spell points and ability points and for these like extra type of attacks you can do. So the combat actually gets pretty fun, and I'm enough that I'm like that plus the story is enough to keep me going. um, the story kind of wastes your time. That just seems to be a theme with Square Enix. I think is
Yeah.
they're like, I'm trying to skip side quests with it, and there are scenes where it's like this could have been condensed. Like it just takes for
This could have been an email.
this could have been an email. But there are some story beats that are cool, and you get to see Sephiroth a little bit. You get to learn more about Zach. Um, and I think if you're a diehard fan, it's worth playing. The combat is kind of fun if you can get it really cheap, but don't go out of your way for it. You could. I
Okay,
think if you want
three more
this,
questions real quick.
yeah,
Where are you playing this?
Steam Deck.
Steam Deck. Okay.
Yeah,
Do you have any idea of the time to beat?
I've heard it's 8 to 10 hours, and I would say I'm like 6 to 7 hours in, and I'm probably about 70%.
And you're
There's
beelining
10
it. Okay.
there's 10 missions, and I'm partway through mission 7. So
Oh, so it's mission based.
it is
Kind of
mission
like
based.
chapters, or
Yeah, they're chapters.
okay.
But it is kind of a mission based structure. The exploration is pretty wonky. Like it's a very wonky game, but the combat is kind of fun. Characters are interesting. There's some cool story beats. The music is pretty good. It's
Okay.
like just enough to keep me going, but I wouldn't like
Yeah,
go out of
I'll
your
never
way
get
for
to
it.
it. When does it take place? Is it pre Final Fantasy VII?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's before 7.
Interesting. Wow.
So
Will so here's the final question. These
yeah,
are all the games, right? Do you have anything else you played in
that's
February for
pretty
you?
much it. Yeah.
So the question is, you've started Rebirth. Is there any fatigue, or is this train keep on moving and you're going to play Rebirth until it's done and
I can't get
not
enough.
feel any burnout?
I can't get enough of it.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, there's not really burnout, and I think that's because Rebirth, in a lot of ways, is a pretty different game than Remake. Obviously, it's a continuation of the story and the characters, um, but gameplay wise, it's more of an open world experience. And aesthetically, at least the opening areas you start in, like Remake, you're in Midgard, the industrial kind of grungy city. Rebirth, pretty much out the gate, you start more out in the open world, like in nature, where it's greener, it's more beautiful, and
Nature.
it's not linear. You're
Yeah.
like
Okay.
you're not just going down long corridors, shuffling through things. Um, for the most part, it's kind of like Horizon Zero Dawn or something, where it's like you have this open map and you start to collect quests and it directs you and there's things you're doing, but um, the feel of the gameplay, like that element of the gameplay, is different enough that it feels like I'm doing something new. And obviously the combat is still there. The combat is maybe even better because they've added a layer to it with the synergy abilities that's pretty interesting. And then they've also added some other mini games that for me have been a hit. It sounds like maybe this is not going to be your thing, but they have like
Yeah, we'll see.
their Fort Condor, I think, is still in this game as well, but they also have a card game called Queen's
Oh
Blood.
no.
um,
Okay.
Now a lot of these things I
Well,
think are
hold on.
most
Don't go too far. You're going to spoil March's
yeah,
podcast here.
true. I will just say some of these mini games are really fun, and it changes the dynamic.
I have seen my brother playing quite a few of them and enjoying
Yeah.
them, and I'm just like, man, will that be me? I probably will, but looking at it on paper, I'm like, that doesn't sound great.
Oh,
But
dude, Queen's Blood is so
we'll
good.
see.
I'm going to be fascinated to see if we have very different opinions. But
We
anyway,
shall see. I'm about to start it here soon.
it like changes some fundamental gameplay elements that makes it feel really fresh, that really fits what's happening with where you're at in the story. Well, at the same time, you're obviously just continuing Final Fantasy VII, and um, originally I was kind of skeptical as to why they were splitting this into 3 games, and now I'm starting to feel like I don't think they needed the padding, but I do feel like having like some separate games to explore all of the things in this world is actually really
Yeah,
worthwhile. I think they take too much advantage of it, but it's pretty cool. So
I can see that. I really enjoyed the focus on Midgar, and I'm a little
yeah,
bit skeptical about leaving Midgar because I liked it so much. But we'll see how it
there's
goes. Definitely,
I think there's things you'll like. I
yeah,
do think
I'm
there's
sure
things you'll like. Yeah.
you'll
So
look
that's it.
back on Q1 for 2024 as the Final Fantasy VII
Yeah.
era of your life here.
I haven't
So,
seen my family in a month, but I've gotten through all the Final Fantasy VII. So what about
so
you?
for
Let's shift
for
gears. What are
me,
you playing?
yeah, I'll try and be not too um, try and be a little speedy here. But I think one of the highlights for me this past month was I randomly got into one of my backlog Steam games that I had been waiting to play for a while called Taiji. Um, and it is essentially the most Witness like game that I've ever played post The Witness, which I believe is the best puzzle game ever created in the history of the universe. Um, it has its issues, but man, The Witness was just, to me, it was, I guess it was the Hollow Knight of puzzle games. It was just 10 out of 10, had some mind blowingly cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Made you feel smart, made you feel dumb. Um, really cool aesthetic. And this essentially is a top-down indie version of The Witness. You're on these sky islands. It's
Love a Sky
pixelated.
Island. Yeah.
You gotta love I mean, yeah, for sure. Copying Tears of the Kingdom,
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Really.
No,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure this came out before that. um, but yeah, it's a pixel art game, which isn't always my favorite, but that's to say it's very simple in its presentation, but its art style is definitely drawing from The Witness. Even still, you can kind of see it. And then the gameplay premise of everything is The Witness. There's certain areas or sections of these sky islands, all kind of trying to teach you a different core element or logic behind a puzzle. And it's very much like The Witness. It's open worldish. You can go anywhere and you'll walk up to a puzzle and you'll be like, that's a different language, I don't understand that. So you got to walk until you find something that you're like, okay, I can see that this is kind of the 2+2 version of this puzzle. let me try and solve it. Okay, that worked. um I thought the puzzles for the entirety of the game, I would say the puzzles were fantastic. Really, there were a couple that were tricky, or I was like, how did that work? But um, I thought the puzzle quality was probably 10 out of 10 for this entire game. Um, and what was really interesting about this that I don't remember from The Witness is that in this game, it really does test your understanding of logics for puzzles. There were several times where I would solve 10 puzzles, 20 puzzles, and then get to the final one of a sequence and realize I didn't fully understand the logic. Like I understood it enough to kind of get through, but now it had changed something or flipped something on its head. And so I would literally have to go back to previous puzzles and resolve them, see if I could solve them a different way, try and like fundamentally understand the logic behind the puzzle to progress. And that can be frustrating, but I mean, if you like puzzle games, it's great because when you finally understand the logic and then you move on, it's that much more satisfying
Yeah.
because it can feel like, oh, I'm cruising, this is easy. And then, if you could be two types of people, you could get that roadblock and be like, this game is dumb, that doesn't make any sense, or you could spend a half an hour going back and trying to re-understand these puzzles. So, um, had a blast with it. I think it took probably, uh, I mean, it was less than 10 hours to beat. Um, Probably 7 to 8. I mean, it's going to vary depending on your
Depending on how
luck or
smart, depending how dumb
your
you are, might take
depending on
longer.
how stupid you are. This might take longer,
It might
but
take me like 15 hours,
there
but
was a puzzle where I had to pull out some notes and write stuff down, and I always love that when it's like makes
mhm.
you go outside the game and to pull a solution out. So I had a blast with it. This is for me. This is the closest any game has come to The Witness. I think it's a 10 out of 10 game. I don't think it's I don't even want to say I don't think it's as good as The Witness. I think it is. It's just different. And if
Mhm.
you are a puzzle poppy like me, then you got to go check out Taiji because it's good. Grab it on. It's great on the Steam Deck. I don't know where else it is. I don't know if it's on other platforms, but super good puzzle game. I mean, it goes up. It goes to number 2 on my list of puzzle games I've ever played.
Yeah, that's cool.
Which
The art looks really pretty. It looks neat. I remember really being fascinated by The Witness. Um, I at the time wasn't as into puzzle games, and I got a little frustrated, and
yeah,
I
you
just
were
kind of
dumber back then.
I was even dumber, believe it or not. So I kind of fell off. I kind of fell off my gameplay of that. It was also like we were in the middle of like it was shortly before we moved, and I just kind of that and many other games in that period of my life got away from me. I do think I'll finish The Witness at some point because it there was something unique and just utterly enchanting about The Witness. It was one of those video games where it's like this changed my perspective of what video games can be like, and what puzzles can be like.
Yeah,
And so I need to go back to that, and I think I'll just start it over when I do because it's been like 6 or 7 years. But
yeah,
so
you'd almost have to.
I'll probably do The Witness. I would absolutely have to. I think I'll probably play The Witness first, but I do like puzzles. Um, and at some point, if this is that good, like this, I will play this at some. I don't know how soon it'll be, but I'll play this at some point. So excited to hear that you found another puzzle game that is of that quality. And I think a lot of the games we talk about and that people tend to get attention are the more main franchise, like high action type things, and those are all cool. But it is nice to like see these different like niches within uh, gaming and with indie
Yeah.
gaming in particular too. Makes me happy to hear that there are some really high quality things that eventually I'll get to.
And the thing about puzzle games is I think they're probably the hardest game to make. Um, just because making puzzles in general is such a challenging concept because they have to work obviously, but there's a certain amount of you have to get to a point where you respect the puzzles in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's times where you play a puzzle game and you're like, okay, this is just dumb. Like you didn't teach that very well, or this logic isn't staying true through certain puzzles.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you have to develop puzzles well enough that it earns the respect of the player, and that can be really hard. And then you also have to straddle that line between difficult but not obtuse, and then also difficulty is different from person to person. There's just so many variables when it comes to puzzle games,
Yeah.
um, that lead to there not being enough good ones, honestly. And so when you find one like Taiji, it's worth shouting out. So if you like puzzle games, obviously, why haven't you played The Witness yet if you haven't? And then next up, I would go straight to Taiji. So
Yeah.
I did have another puzzle game I went into right after that because it was just sitting in Steam and I needed something kind of short. It's called Gorogoa, and it's an older, kind of a classic in the puzzle genre, and a very unique concept. I don't have a ton to say on it, but essentially it is um, it's as if you're in a book and you've got pictures of certain things, but you can interact. You can kind of move around in the world a little bit. You can zoom out, and your goal is to take. There's 4 quadrants, or up to 4 quadrants of photos, and you're trying to move them around and zoom out and get to the right location where these photos can interact with each other in a puzzle way and progress the narrative of the story. It's a short game. I think it took me about 2 hours. Um, wasn't mind blowing. Wasn't a must play, but based on the sheer uniqueness of it, I would say if you like puzzle games, it's not expensive in 2 hours. It's a night basically. I think it's worth checking out just because I don't think there's anything that's done what this game does. Whether or not it's your favorite thing in the world, maybe not, but I think it's unique enough to justify. It doesn't overstay its welcome, I
Yeah.
guess, is the biggest thing I would say about it. If this game were 6 hours, it'd be like, nah, dude.
Yeah.
The fact that it's about 2 hours, I think it understands when its time is up. So
Yeah, that's cool. Sometimes it's nice to have like a palate cleanser like that too. Like doesn't need to blow your mind necessarily, but it's kind of something very different. 2 hours, like you said, it's one evening. Probably would be
yeah,
good if I had like a palate cleanser in between one of my many Final Fantasy VII
right in between
iterations.
Final Fantasy games,
Yeah.
there was 1 or 2 puzzles in it where I was like, okay, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Um, weird. It's a weird game. So Gorogoa, and then we talked about Intermission. Last game I have is Returnal. I hop back into Returnal
Oh, really?
um,
Okay.
with
Yeah.
the concept, actually, with the misguided concept of playing the DLC with my brother over a weekend, because I knew that the DLC came out and I never touched it, and I thought the DLC was co-op. Come to find out, the DLC is not co-op, but with the DLC they added co-op for the main game.
Oh,
So
interesting.
kind of confusing and weird. I don't know why they didn't just allow co-op.
You think
I
it would
guess the
be
only
at
reason,
least applicable for both? Like,
yeah, it's very very odd to find that out. I guess the reason, after having played the DLC, which is essentially just a roguelike tower where you try to climb the tower and get the highest score by defeating rooms of enemies. It does have leaderboards, and I guess they just were going for more of a leaderboard roguelike. I don't know. I think it would have been fine to add.
just
You,
have a
you still
mode
could
that's
have
not on
leader
the. Yeah, just
or
you can have
separate the
different.
modes, or
Yes.
have leaderboards with co-op. I don't know. I don't know why they
Yeah,
didn't do it.
or
But
separate leaderboard. Yeah. Yeah. No.
anyways, I ended up essentially replaying Returnal because my brother had never. He stopped about halfway through, and we were like, all right, let's play some co-op, and we ended up going through almost in one night beating the game. We had to come back. We lost our run um, to the final boss that night, and we had to come back the next day and beat the game. But very cool in co-op. I mean, Returnal, if anything, it was just a reminder for me how good the gameplay is in Returnal. It truly, I think we've talked maybe excessively about defining genres, but these games kind of have. Final Fantasy VII did, Witness did. I feel like Returnal is a genre defining type of game that there's nothing like. That arcade third person shooter. You get your bullet hell games and things like that, but this kind of took that to another level and does it so well that it's just, you kind of just want to play it even if you have no reason to play it. It just feels good
Mhm.
to. The movement is so quick paced. The combat is so quick paced and visceral, and I don't know. They really crushed it. I kind of hope that they do a. I really didn't like the story of that game. I thought it was really. It kind of felt like the ending of Lost. It just was like, all
Yeah.
right, whatever. But I hope that they continue with this gameplay type, whatever they do. And I don't think we know. I don't think we've heard what they're doing next. So
I don't. Yeah, I
um,
haven't.
it was a blast in co-op. It was a lot of fun to replay it, and to have 2 people running around shooting aliens is always fun, as we know. And then the DLC, I will say I didn't stick with it too long, but um, it's it's just what the game needed, because if you enjoy the gameplay of Returnal, it offers a way to just to
Keep
just
doing
play
it. Yeah.
Returnal without having to replay the game. You can just boot up the tower and play as many rooms as you can and get a build and get stronger and try and survive. And so really cool. It's a
Yeah.
good game. I think it's a little underrated as we look back on
Yeah.
the launch of PS5, or I guess it came out a year after, 2021,
Yeah, it
I
was
think.
2021.
Yeah.
I think it was like 6 months after, but I kind of want to
Yeah.
give Returnal another try at some point because I kind of bounced off of it. Like I agree, the gameplay it was hard. I remember it was hard, but the gameplay felt pretty good. It looked really good. It was an intriguing, like uh, just the visuals, everything was really interesting. But I kind of bounced off of it, so I don't know. I might try that again someday.
Yeah. You probably never will, but they did add a way to suspend your cycle so that you can actually like pause in the middle of a run and come back and play it.
Okay, yeah, that was a big
Um,
reason. Is like my daughter was kind
yeah.
of young at that point. Is just I was always getting interrupted, which was
Yeah.
bad
There's a lot
for
of
that game.
discourse around no saving and that sort of situation. So
Yeah.
um, it's good. It was a lot of fun. So that's it for games. I did briefly want to check. Did you watch the Avatar Netflix live action series?
I have started it. I'm
Oh, you
like
started. Okay.
25 minutes into the first episode. I'm not super far in yet. Have you?
How are you halfway through an episode? Oh my goodness.
I watched like 5 minutes a night.
All right,
Like, cause
give me your 5 minutes a night. I watch it in
yeah,
2 minute segments.
well, yeah, it was like
What
over
are
the
your
course
initial impressions?
mixed.
Yeah,
Um,
that's about.
it's it's like with the M Night Shyamalan version that we had. This is a lot better than that. You
I
know,
know, but that bar
um,
is at
the
the
bar is
bottom.
pretty
So
low. um, it's tough. Like it's kind of cool. I think some of the like effects and visuals I've seen so far are pretty good for live action. Like the last Airbender is one of those things where it's like I feel like it's so well suited to like an animated form. And I still think that's the better way to watch it. But they do a pretty good job. Like it's cool to see it in like a different format enough that I'll probably keep watching it. My main issues with it right now are one that it's like the animated form is just a better way to watch it, like in by almost every metric. So why wouldn't you? But if you've seen that a million times and you want a different take on it, then go for it. The other issue I have is it feels like they're trying to make it more like edgy adult, like not like in terms of like adult content, but more like the tone a little bit. They're going for like it's darker, it's edgier, like a little angstier, and it it kind
a
of
little angstier.
a little angstier. Uh, Aang is a good example actually of like they made his character a little
Yeah,
bit less joyful and childish. I know a lot of people online have talked about this. I think that's true though. Is like he's not quite the joyful kid he is. He's a little bit more focused and stuff. And that the tone feels kind of weird. Also, the dialogue, the dialogue isn't as good. Like there are some moments where the dialogue is like very exposition
yeah.
heavy or cringy. So I
You've
don't know.
touched on quite a few
I
things that.
I think you should give it a try. It's not completely bad. Um, yeah.
So I watched season one
Oh,
or
you've
the
seen the
full
whole first
season.
season. You let me just
Yeah.
keep going.
Well, yeah. I mean, I will say the pilot episode I thought was rough. One of
Okay,
the
that's good
roughest
if
episodes,
it's good if it gets better.
because I think trying to set up the premise of Avatar in an hour, and then also hit certain like expected
Story
almost like
beats.
dialogue sequences and story beats,
Yeah, dialogue
they
sequences
feel
too. Yeah.
forced. I don't know if you've seen Graham
Mhm.
Graham doing the
Yes.
intro.
That was one of the really
Oh,
bad exposition.
that
She's
was
like,
so brutal.
as
And
you all know, the
yes,
Avatar. It's like,
she does the
God.
intro to the series, so it was just so forced and it was bad. I will say, unfortunately, the writing is it caps out at decent, and a lot of
Yeah,
the times it's not good, and that's just, you can't have it. You can't have it. Writing has to be good. Acting is also mixed. There's a couple characters that are just not doing it, and
yeah.
it's
I
it's
hate
it
to
is a
rag on
mixed
child
bag.
actors, but I feel like Aang and Katara in particular,
Well,
not great.
I don't know
I'm
how
sure
deep
there's
I want to
other
go
ones
into
too.
this.
Yeah, yeah.
Aang I thought actually did a decent job. I actually thought
Okay,
Aang
he's my least favorite
portrayed
in the
him,
pilot.
the character. Katara to me was a swing and a miss as far as
Yeah,
casting. Um, Nothing about her feels interesting or Katara like. I think they crushed it with Sokka. Sokka is
Sokka's
perfect
the
in
best
my
of them.
opinion.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then I don't know if you've met at this point Zuko and Iroh. great.
Zuko and Iroh are really good, actually.
Fantastic.
They were,
Azula later is pretty good. I would say like this show is so conflicting because
yeah,
there's scenes where you're like, I'm watching the A the A series of this show, you know,
yeah,
A-list actors. And then there's scenes where you're like, man, this feels like the B side. Like
yeah.
the backups got in here and are playing this character or whatever. And
That's how I
it's
feel with
just
Zuko and
constantly
Iroh.
back and forth.
Yeah,
And then the writing is not great a lot of the time. And then the other problem I think is just that the whole premise of trying to do this, trying to do season 1 in 8 episodes is a
yeah,
flawed premise from the beginning because you mentioned Aang, it has a more serious tone. Well, part of that is just because if you try to take the story of Avatar and put it in live action, the dissonance of trying to keep it as carefree and childish as the animated version, I think would come off. It would be really hard to do in live action because the
possibly.
premise of Airbender is very there's a lot of dark to it,
True.
and so
Yep.
when you put real people in there, it kind of inherently becomes a darker feeling. But the bigger problem is that, like especially with Aang, I think a lot of the discourses around there's just not time to let anything
Mm,
breathe, to let characters have fun or do meaningless things, quote unquote, to
yeah,
build their relationships because the plot has to fit in 8 episodes and it just doesn't. And so
I think you're
often
right.
you're
Yeah,
combining 4 episodes into one and nothing gets a chance to breathe and everything has to be all business all the time because we
yeah,
have to get from point A to point B to point C. I think that's the biggest problem. And at the end of the day, I'm just kind of looking at season 1 and I'm like, did I have fun? Yeah, I think episode 2 was by far my favorite. I think you'll really enjoy episode 2. 3 and 4 I enjoyed. The back half of the season I didn't enjoy much at all. So I had fun. I kind of look forward. There's some characters that they nailed so well that I'm like, I kind of want to continue watching.
for
But I'm
them.
also
Yeah,
left after season 1, as we all kind of expect. Why do we keep doing this? We need to stop doing this. Like, there's no
yeah,
reason to do this because the animated show is perfection,
yeah,
10 out of 10 across the board. And I don't think anything can do it better or do it differently and add to it. So,
yeah. Thankfully, the animated
anyways,
version's still there, so you can go watch
I know.
the best version of it. But yeah, I think you're right. I think the big thing is like Avatar has darkness like the original one, but I think what works so well is it is such a contrast between darkness and then the lighthearted, like carefree, like childishness of Aang
Yeah.
and
And the
Katara.
episodes
I,
where nothing plot wise is happening, but the characters are off on an adventure goofing around and it really
thematically that worked because it like well it also
builds.
developed their characters a lot, but thematically it also showed that kind of the lightheartedness and those other things in life are kind of what give you the
Yeah.
strength to go up against the
And also
darker
the growth
plot heavy
Aang had to
things.
make. He wasn't ready
That
to
too, yeah.
be what he needed
Yeah.
to be.
He
He
did
was a kid
he
having
didn't want
fun.
to be. He was like just a kid. And so
Yeah.
I yeah, I think it's kind of a shame to miss out on some of those things though. Like I understand why it happened. It's kind of the classic thing. Like they have a budget, they have so many episodes that they can afford. It costs a lot to put this production together.
Yep.
So I'll keep watching it. And like I said, I don't hate it. I think there's cool
You'll have to
parts.
update us maybe.
Iroh and Zuko are awesome. Like it's a lot of
Yeah.
fun to watch them. So um, I think for it could have been a lot worse. I'll say that. We know
Absolutely.
we
I
know it
mean,
could have been.
we know it could have been worse. I actually have half of mine to go back and rewatch the movie because I've only seen it once and
Yeah,
I've wiped it from my memory.
it's terrible.
Um, but I'm curious. I know that it's bad, and I almost want to watch it, you know, just to
Just like
laugh
a hate
for
watch it.
a hate watch. Yeah,
We
yeah.
rewatched it a couple years ago because Belle got really into the animated series and she wanted to watch the movie too. So Brandy and I were like, we're trying to tell her like this is not good. You're not gonna be happy.
You
So we
should have
watched
been
it.
like, "Oh my god, you haven't seen the movie. It's better." You should have like hyped it up so much just to see like
Yeah,
as a
we should
kid
have.
would she
Would
have
she be
taken
into
that
it?
and been like, "It was amazing."
I will say it was funny because she was like 5 or 6 at the time, and she was just laughing her head off at how bad the airbending effects were. So that
Oh
tells you like
man.
I had a 5-year-old laughing at how bad
Yeah,
the
that's
effects
not good.
looked. So I don't know. It was bad.
Yeah, I don't yeah, it's just the core premise of the amount of money that it takes to do these visual effects in live action and the
Yeah,
budget it takes to do 8 episodes is just flawed from the beginning because you need more than 8 episodes, but you'll
you
never
do.
get more than 8 episodes. So
Yeah.
anyways, I just wanted to I wanted to touch on that. And then the last thing we
Hmm.
just saw Dune Part 2.
Okay,
Um
I've seen it too.
have you seen it?
Yeah,
You've seen it?
yeah,
I'd say 9 out of 10. I thought it was excellent. What do you think?
yeah. I Originally I was like, I want to give it a 10 out of 10. I'd probably say 9 out. There's like one or two. I have a couple of nitpicks, but overall, I haven't the way
Yeah,
I
between
felt in
9 and 10.
yeah, but the way I felt in that movie, I haven't felt that really since the Lord of the Rings movies. Like, I know a lot of people have been saying, I'm not saying it's better or worse or whatever. I'm just saying that
Yeah,
it's the type of movie where I haven't felt like I need to be in the theater and you just lose yourself. Like I was in the
yeah.
theater, I forgot time existed. It's like, like I inhaled some of some of the spice or something. Um,
hmm
it was
What's
it
funny
was
is
great.
I haven't seen the Lord of the Ring movies actually, but I came out of this movie and was like, by the time the third one's out, this feels like a Lord of the because they're
Yeah.
long and
Yeah,
they're
they are
kind of
long.
slow. They're kind of slow paced and methodical and cerebral a lot of the time.
Mhm.
It feels like that Lord of like a new generation of Lord of the Rings type movies where you'll sit down and do you have 12 hours, 15
Yeah,
hours to
it
watch
does.
Dune? So
And then you'll say
but
yes
man,
because it's
this
really good.
and then you'll say yes. This movie, it what I man, things I loved about it, it doesn't it doesn't insult your intelligence. If
Mhm.
anything, it demands quite a bit because you have to I mean, it's moving along. It doesn't overly explain things. It expects intelligence of the viewer to understand plots and subplots. The writing, the thing about this movie in a nutshell, I like things that are good, and this is good. It's well done, and
Mhm.
that's
It is.
truer. Like the older I get, I'm like, what do I like? Well, you know what I like is when someone is talented and does something well,
Yeah.
whatever genre that is, whatever medium, and you can just tell watching this movie that it is 10 out of 10 in just about everything. I mean, the
Yeah.
visuals of this movie are probably some of the best visuals I've ever seen. I mean,
That's
just
one of the things I
everything,
said too. Is like I think this my favorite visuals are this movie.
such a
It was so good.
spectacle. And it's not just the CGI. The CGI is immaculate. Like everything looks so real and immersive, but
Yeah.
even the art direction,
It's the
every
and the
scene is
cinematography and
so
like
perfectly framed and
yeah.
lit, and the colors and the lighting, and man, it was so good. It's one of those movies that I think will only get better with the second,
Yeah.
third, fourth watches. It was a little
Absolutely.
slow in parts, um, but man, yeah, I just wanted to touch base on it because I watched it and I was like, this is impressive, and I can't wait to watch. I can't wait to see the third one. I haven't read the book, probably will at
Yeah.
some point. I can't wait to watch these all in a row. It's an example of someone taking the book and not ruining it, like making it. Well,
Yeah.
actually, I don't know, but I'm just watching it and I'm like,
It's pretty
I can only
faithful. Yeah.
imagine. I can only imagine that people who came into Dune already knowing Dune are probably really relieved and enjoying themselves and not like, man, I wish they hadn't done this. That would
Yeah.
be a surprise to me. So
Yeah, most of the people I've seen who've like have a long history with Dune are positive on, are very positive on it. I read the book like shortly before seeing the first movie, so technically I went into it having experienced Dune the book, and it's pretty faithful. Like there are some deviations here and there, but they capture the spirit of the original book so well, and then elevate it like in film because they can do the cinematography and they can do all these other. You have people's
yeah,
performances and. Um, the performances too. I think that was the other thing is like
yeah,
the various actors in this were just they just knocked it out of the park. But um, it's something else. It's cool to have a movie like that. Like
I know.
it reminded me why I love movies so much because I feel like a lot of movies have just gotten so like sterile and like straight to Netflix
Like it's
and
like games.
like games. And
All
so it's
industries are getting a little watered down, and every once in a while you get something and you're like, oh, this
this
is
is
true
art.
talent, true art,
Yeah.
and it shows, and it's great to consume. So
Yeah.
um yeah, I had a blast with it. It's one of those things where like watching this movie, I've thought about it before. Because I'm reading through the Stormlight Archive at the moment, um, Way of Kings, and now I'm in Words of Radiance, and I'm
Yes.
like, I wouldn't want them to make a movie out of this because odds are it would only be to the detriment. But I'm like, if it could be this quality, if it could be, but odds are it won't be. But if it could be, I'm like, all right, I would be down for that.
I would say of any of the modern fantasy authors, Sanderson has the most chance of getting big budget. Like he's one of the best selling authors in the world at this point.
Yeah.
So it's like it's maybe. I also feel like with Stormlight being animated might be really cool. Like if Stormlight could get like
Oh man,
a
you know what's funny is
if
as
it could
I've
get like an
started reading,
arcane treatment.
halfway through Words of Radiance, I kind of in my head decided that it had an arcane art style, and I
Yeah, yeah,
started
nice.
picturing scenes and characters in that art style, oh, that would be
Mhm.
so, that would be good.
Yeah,
If it was
yeah.
good. If it was good,
If he
right?
was
And
good,
so
yeah, yep.
that's the problem. Who
Well,
knows?
we'll see. The nice thing with Sanderson is like he's pretty involved with anything like that, and I know he's had a lot of Hollywood conversations, which can
Yeah.
go nowhere. But I feel like if something like that happens, I think he will try to retain enough control that it'll probably be good. But you never know. So we'll see.
It's so scary. It would be so scary. I would be
Yeah,
so excited but scared at the same time. We'll see.
yeah,
Maybe after book 5 is out, part 1 is done.
yeah.
Maybe he looks to make that. That was a total side tangent of mine, anyways. But yeah, you do see the contrast though of like Dune to Avatar, and it's like there's so much not good in Avatar. It's like part of you does think, what if we could get something
Dune
of the
level.
quality of Dune
Yeah.
in Avatar, and you keep hoping for that, but I
And I
don't think
think
it's
it's
ever going to happen.
possible, but it's tough. Like, yeah, a
I
lot
don't
of
think
it's just
anyone
so
will ever
money
get the budget
based.
at this point.
Yeah,
With
it's also money dependent. Because
yeah,
even Dune, like Dune isn't 8 episodes. It's, I guess if you do hour count, it's probably about 6 hours. In the next movie, you'll get it to about 9. But
9. So
um,
it's actually pretty close.
it's
I
actually
don't
pretty
know.
close. But um, yeah,
Medium matters. Anyways, there's our always longer than expected discussion of the month. So
yeah,
um, there's always more to talk about than you think when you sit down. And
there really is.
February, I mean, the year's been off to a pretty crazy start when it comes to content, whether it's shows, movies, games, and we'll see if it slows down. There's a whole lot of empty spaces for the rest of the year. Perhaps we'll be
Yeah,
talking about backlog games. Who knows? But
yeah. I mean, we got Dragon's Dogma coming up. I think that might be
oh,
pretty
that
big.
is going to
It's
be
looking
big.
good.
Yeah, you're right.
After that, though, I think we do have a bit of a gap. So yeah,
We'll see. We'll see. Yeah. Thanks for joining us here for February. If you have any thoughts, leave them in the comment section. What did you play? Any thoughts on the games? Anything we got horribly wrong? Let us know.
Did anyone else go on
And
a Final Fantasy VII bender?
yeah, right.
Any other fellow
Tune
addicts?
in March to find out how many more Final Fantasy games Zach has played. He starts at 1 and just
Gotta
gets his
find
way
them all.
to 14,
Yep.
16. You'll get lost in 14 for quite a while. I hear that one's
I might not have
thousand
time.
hours
Yeah,
to play.
I might not have time for that one. Yeah.
Oh man. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. We'll wrap it up here, and yeah, that's it. We'll catch you in the next one.